So, a random tweet from the guest star for this season of Star Trek Discovery on his Twitter account seemingly is starting to spark off rumors that Star Trek Discovery is being canceled only 2 episodes in. This is extremely premature without any actual announcements or indications from the companies actually financing and producing these things. And the idea that they're going to up and cancel Discovery while they have several other shows based around the Star Trek property already in the process of being made. It just seems unlikely they're going to pull the rug out of the one without yanking the entire thing down. So if they're smart in any degree, which is dubious considering some of the strategies this company has made previously and the whole ramp up to get us where we are now, but if they're smart, they'll sit on Discovery and give it time to build some legs under it and just understand that it's not a run right out of the gate kind of hit type of situation. Season 2 is massively improved and seems to be addressing a lot of the basic concerns that I and a lot of the other fans had been expressing that they had. I mean, it sounds like, well, the company might not have been directly acknowledging anything. They were hearing what people were saying. But it doesn't matter if no one's listening to the apology or willing to accept it or goes in with their point of view so tainted and politicized that they're not able to hear the apology or the attempts to make amends. And so for the sake of argument, let's pretend that Star Trek Discovery is going to get canceled. Why would that be? What's the cause of it? And what good will be accomplished out of it? And what kind of trend does it indicate that things potentially are on, if that's the case? Why is Star Trek being strangled to death by its own fans? Albeit Star Trek has really been dead for a while, long before even the Abrams movies came out and the first attempt to try to re-jumpstart the franchise. Because in truth, Star Trek died when they blew up Data at the end of Star Trek Nemesis. And what life it had left in it was finished off by Scott Bakula. And while, yes, over the years since, Enterprise seems a more redeemable show than it was at the time it was a turnoff, and a lot of people, like myself, I just didn't feel like watching it when it was on the air and needed the viewers. But it wasn't out of some sort of knee-jerk fuck you to the people making it, because the people making it had made statements on Twitter, because Twitter didn't exist back then, but had made political statements that I didn't agree with. And so therefore, fuck their show and all their political messaging. A thing I've noticed that's going on with both halves of this bisected fandom is that both the hard conservative fans and the hard liberal fans are both constantly watching everything they like, listening for dog whistles, listening for indications that there's some sort of hidden racist agenda or some hidden anti-racist agenda going on, and whatever it is they're watching. And they're finding these dog whistles stretching all the way back to the dawn of fucking time and everything. Everything. When you train yourself to listen for dog whistles, you make yourself into a dog. There's a huge sea of people in the middle, in between these two extremes, who are a mixture of things, but they basically end up congealing around the fact that they're able to look past it. Some of them are just dumb and oblivious and don't notice the dog whistles. Other people do, but they just shrug it off and look past it because they realize that every creative art on the planet, from storytelling to visualization to whatever, anything, especially stuff that has a plot, though, in particular, novels, television, movies, role-playing games, video games, a story is having to be told, and even if it's a collective of people telling that story, they're all going to have their own points of views and their own personal agendas of what it is they're trying to get across by what they're portraying. And so, yes, everything that isn't just a list of goods in a warehouse can be skewed in such a way that you can view it as someone's propaganda. And looking for that constantly and being aware of that constantly does no one any good. Because this was a little experiment to try to revive Star Trek after it was dead. The Abrams movies didn't quite succeed in making like the big billion-dollar franchise that they wanted, but much like how Universal is discovering with their monster universe movies, which they've now given over to Blumhouse, and Star Trek works when you have a low budget. New audiences, young people, millennials, even older Generation Zs who are now edging up into adulthood, enjoy the old Star Trek, even though it's not super fast-paced and intense and doesn't have the most radical of modern CGI effects. And when you go to a theater, you don't need it to be 100% realistic what you're watching on the stage. And in the same way, when you're watching something on a television screen or a movie screen, it doesn't have to be 100% literal representation of what you're looking at. Because you, as the audience, understands that you're participating in something fictional for your own entertainment and gratification. And part of what makes Star Trek is the silly, colorful outfits and the silly, dorky sets and the silly, dorky makeup and stuff. And that's possibly why Orville seems to capture people's fandom a little bit easier than the newer Star Treks. Because the newer Star Trek trend is for this more cinematic kind of hyper-tense, hyper-realism, which has been one of my complaints about it, that it's so off-tone from what Star Trek originally was. But I'm trying to view the new Star Treks kind of how I view the X-Men movies versus the X-Men comics. When the X-Men movies came out, I was very familiar with the X-Men comics for my teenage years, and so I found them really just jarring how they screwed up with the character relationships and who was what in different ages and who was doing what kind of roles for the team. Because it was all like mixed matched and out of joint. But over time, as the years went on and more of these X-Men movies built up, I remember like around the time Apocalypse came out, I had a marathon of X-Men movies over the course of a week, watching one or two a day. And I found that the bulk of them made it easier to kind of accept it as its own continuum. That this is just this alternate universe's telling of X-Men and its own thing separate from the comics, even though there's similar elements. And I kind of feel like that's inevitably what's going to end up being the case with the new wave of Star Trek movies. And the Star Wars, too, because this leads into that. And so really what Discovery needs is just more time under its belt and some other shows around it to kind of frame it in this new style. But if the fans don't watch it, and if they continue to refuse to give it a chance, eventually at some point, they will pull the plug on the fucking thing. And is that really a victory? Or a Pyrrhic victory? Yeah, you got one over on the studio. You showed them. But you could also be ensuring that this thing will never be resurrected again. Because this was the attempt to try to bring it back. Why is someone going to try to bring it back a second time if the last example of them doing that was they try to finance it, they try to get it up off the ground, and the fan base was so rabidly against it that it turned everyone else off from giving it a chance. Like, no one wants to watch something that everyone who likes it hates it. It shouldn't have to be spelled out that way. It should seem kind of obvious. And do you really want this to happen to Star Wars? Do you really want to be doing this to the Marvel movies? Like, what other beloved things can we take down? Can we destroy? We can destroy D&D. Maybe take down the Muppet Show. They're too progressive, obviously. Yes. Jim Henson was a social justice warrior from hell, no doubt. No doubt. I mean, Kermit's obviously a cuck. Anyway, it's the Canary and the Dilithium mine. And I guess really just all I'm saying is you should ask yourself, is this really the future you want? Where the stuff that you say you like is going to be lost to time and memory and forgotten. All because you had to throw a conniption fit because an actor or producer or writer expressed a political opinion that you didn't like.